Here is that 1980 fear cycle peak. Here is that greed cycle. Here is the 2016, 17, 18 fear cycle peak. Something went wrong here. We were supposed to be actually very strong here, but instead we were actually abnormally weak. Something disconnected here. Oh, I see. Gone and fucked with the money supply. Okay, well now notice how price just blew right through those old cycle peaks, and we're trading at multiples of those cycle peaks. Why? Well, because they have printed multiples of this money supply. We are now in the window. What is it? It's 2024. 2024 to 2032. We're now in the end game window where this is exactly like Weimar Germany. So the thing is that, the Bernanke experiment, right? They just basically kick the can down the road. And, we're seeing these commodities one by one all pop off here. I think we've talked recently about, things like cocoa just going absolutely crazy. I had mentioned in that free video that I did an interview with Wall Street Silver here recently. And of course, I did a tweet recently that I think that silver's sort of turn to be quote unquote repriced is fast approaching. And in a weird sort of way, I actually think that this is more a function of, the Great Reset and all that garbage talk than really economic cycles here. But at the same time, too, we are in the part of the economic cycle where these kind of assets should do well. But here's the cocoa, right? So you can see, woohoo, look at that recent rally, just, absolutely insane. So if we apply the same logic to the silver market, there's the silver market right now, right? And more importantly, right? I don't know whether you saw this or not. Here is the 1980 fear cycle peak. Here is the 2017-18 fear cycle peak. Here is the greed cycle peak. So this is like your baby boomers sort of trading range. But we all know that the money supply itself has been absolutely bastardized, completely corrupted. So are we living in this world of pricing structure, top end of the range, bottom end of the range anymore? Or are we living in a different world? Right. And then let's go back to that cocoa chart like I just showed you a second ago. Here is that 1980 fear cycle peak. Here is that greed cycle. Here is the 2016, 17, 18 fear cycle peak. Something went wrong here. We were supposed to be actually very strong here, but instead we were actually abnormally weak. Something was wrong. Something disconnected here. Oh, I see. Gone and fucked with the money supply. And it was just a question of, okay, well now notice how price just blew right through those old cycle peaks, and we're trading at multiples of those cycle peaks. Why? Well, because they have printed multiples of this money supply. I mean, hell, you could make the argument from 1991 here. That's not even, I guess, 81, not even really that long ago. I mean, the money supply here is 1,500% higher than what it was in 1981. So, I mean, I suppose 1,000 is 10x. So would it make sense that we probably, especially greed cycle peak where the top, should we not maybe go 10x from these levels into this next greed cycle trough, ironically enough? If this number here is around 1,000, then that means that this number here should be around 10,000. And that is cheap. What the hell is expensive? Like if the bottom of this range is 1,000 and the top end of this range is 3,500, that's 3.5x. So that means the top of this should be 30,000. Holy crap. And that's how you get this chart over here back up into these levels, is if this silly price goes, and it's still got 3x to go even from current levels. I wouldn't be surprised that we actually run into a bit of traffic around the 50% level of this, which means, maybe this goes up to like 15 or something. And then that way it would just be one double to get back up to these highs here in price. So don't be surprised if you see, a little bit higher, but then a bit of a pullback. But this is a market that's already moved. Right. And you can't come in and speculate on that now. You've missed the move, right? You were supposed to buy when this thing was just break. I mean, ideally, I suppose you were supposed to buy here and then here and then here. And ironically enough, on that monetary adjusted basis, look how cheap prices were here. when we were down here at like 2,500. Adjusted for currency, this was at like historic lows, ridiculously low lows, even though theoretically this number is like 2 or 3 times that number there. What does that portend? And keep in mind that the foods and fibers, they're sort of like mid-cycle commodity. You know, the metals is always the lagging sector of the economy, and they always move the metals markets last. So interesting. There is the silver, basically right down at historic levels, even though theoretically the price right now is actually, geez, almost 10x what it was here. No, it isn't. You got to take into account the fact that they've 10x the money supply. So actually, prices are basically sitting at exactly the same levels right now. Isn't that tragic? This is how this whole inflation shit works. It's so frustrating.